Just that from the first one she received a response that her drawing style wasn't similar to his, and because of that, he couldn't work for him. On the other hand, the second one hadn't replied yet, but when she went to work with him, she ended up being useful because he had seen her manga to learn how she drew, and the manga she thought was about a wealthy family from how he talked. Only when she told him that at her home they knew her as a princess, he didn't quite understand, and she tried to hide it by saying it was a hobby, pretending that in her free time, she acted as a princess. Well, as a normal person, the guy thought she was crazy, and the situation became uncomfortable, and Ichiro tried to make her feel better for a moment, but since everything was work-related topics, he thought he should find a way to cheer her up. So he asked her if there was something in the list of things she wanted to do that he could help her with. Only just then her brothers overheard their conversation and suggested that going to eat grilled meat cheers people up. Shirori agreed to go, and when they arrived at the barbecue place called La Vaca, clarifying that it's beef, not horse meat, Shirori got too excited because it was her first time. Yes, her first time, but in a place like this. Maki taught her how to grill the meat to perfection. They enjoyed all the food there was, and they left with lifted spirits, while Shirori remembered on the way that it wasn't her fault to have biased ideas, but on the island, as the princess. When there were food gatherings with people, she couldn't participate and kept away just for being the princess. According to her, it was as if, as a child, the first thing she did was give up, but now she lived far from the island of her own will and was willing to learn anything to move forward. The same thing happened to him. If he had given up on some occasions, he wouldn't be enjoying these moments with his brothers. This made Shirori say that she also had to try harder, only that wasn't his intention. He didn't want her to impose more burden than she already had, and she was shining just as she was. She was glad he said that and would strive to shine more. Well, the thing was not to make her feel pressured, but it ended up like that. When they arrived home, Shirori asked Maki where her brother was, and when she told her that he had just arrived home and went straight to his room, she thought maybe she said something wrong and there was a misunderstanding in communication. Well, he just wanted to have told her something better, but couldn't say the things he thought until he thought he could write a letter. And while he wrote, he remembered all the support he received from her, so thinking he could express it better in a letter, he added illustrations too. Only as he couldn't express one little thing, a tiny thing, he ended up making her a manga to explain it better, and from a simple letter, he made a whole manga volume, and the next day he went to give it to her, who still thought she had done something wrong yesterday and had ruined the communication between them, but when she heard from him that he didn't know what she was referring to, she invited him into her room because she was going to give him a letter. And there he saw that she was trying very hard to draw better, a drawing style, and looking at references from well-known animes, which made him think that maybe his letter, in quotes, would repulse her, and at first, he didn't want to give it to her, but she still ended up seeing it. And it made her very excited to read each page and see each illustration where he represented how he felt with her and told her that she had many qualities and virtues. It only took him 80 pages, which made her very happy, and although he had doubts about touching her cheek, she took his hand and did it for him. After that, the mangaka who worked with Shirori for the second time called Ichiro to tell him that when they were talking about him, she seemed very much in love. That's when Ichiro told him that they were dating, and it was something that relieved the mangaka, so he could call her again to be his assistant. This was news that made him happy to hear because it was something that worried her. Another day passed, and it was time to visit Ichiro's father's grave. He was preparing the lunches when suddenly Shirori found him, and with what had happened with the manga she made, she was much more in love than before. And since the visit would be with the family, he didn't want to inconvenience Shirori to accompany them, but his brothers did want to go with her, who didn't mind accompanying them, and went with them to the cemetery where, after saying their prayers, they went to have lunch in a park as if it were a picnic. And there, Chibi found out that Ichiro and Shirori were dating. She had no idea, but she had her suspicions. But supposedly it wasn't anything bad because she only saw her cousin as her older brother. On the other hand, when Maki said she wished her father had visited the doctor more often, she unwittingly started crying, and Ichiro and Shirori consoled her. Of the many handkerchiefs Shirori brought, she gave one to dry her tears and started telling them that on her island, everyone gathered under the stars to remember the deceased, and now that she was doing it under a clear sky, she found it wonderful. After lunch, Ichiro told Chibi to take her brothers home because he would go to leave something at his father's grave, and Shirori accompanied him because she noticed he was down. When they reached the grave, she realized that Ichiro avoided talking about himself, so she did, saying he was a very good person who took care of his brothers, and he just wanted to show her all the good things. So he avoided worrying her and had returned to tell his father something. What he wanted was to introduce Shirori as his girlfriend and ask him to take care of her always. Once they returned home and he remembered those words he said, he thought here smells like marriage. He even imagined how he would say it to his brothers, while he also remembered her words and thought the same, that it was like a marriage proposal. And just then Shirori arrived where he was looking for some water because she felt her temperature had risen, and indeed she had a crazy fever. So he took her back to her room and asked her to rest while he thought that he should take her because he thought her body should be different from normal with a thorn like a tail. And when he brought her some food, she asked him to stay with her for a while and talk to him so he wouldn't leave. So he told her not to worry because he would stay, and he took staying very seriously. He stayed by her side all night and fell asleep sitting to not leave her. In the morning, he woke up and didn't even realize he had fallen asleep there. Seeing that she felt better, he was about to leave her room, but before that happened, she hugged him from behind, and he turned around and hugged her too. "Why is everything so dramatic?" he said at that moment, glad that she was feeling better. And just then, their brothers arrived, who were also worried about Shirori and wondered what Ichiro was doing there. He gave the excuse that he was worried like them. And after that, Ichiro and Shirori were working hard to reach the manga delivery day. When they finished the work, he noticed that Christmas was coming soon and imagined celebrating it with her. So he asked if she had plans, and since she said no, he invited her to spend it with them. Maki appeared with Fumio, and before Shirori could talk about what she knew about Christmas, she covered Fumio's ears, because the poor thing still doesn't know that Santa Claus doesn't exist. And sorry for those who didn't know. The point is, Maki already knew this. And the last gift he received from him was Fumio. After clarifying that Shirori would spend Christmas with them, they arrived for Christmas Eve. Momoko brought some food, and the mangaka with whom Shirori had been an assistant came because he used to be Ichiro's assistant, and they invited him to spend Christmas together. During dinner, Momoko found out that Ichiro and Shirori were dating because they were flirting during dinner. And since Shirori heard that Momoko was happy because he was a good guy, she asked her to tell an anecdote about something he had done, and she told her that once when she stumbled and was bleeding a lot, while Momoko was asking her to take a picture of her bleeding, he was telling her that they had to attend to her wound quickly before it got infected. Although he seemed very worried and a little introverted, Shirori liked him, and she asked Chibi if she could tell an anecdote she had with her cousin, and she had one, but not the one you imagine. When she started school, she wanted to, but her parents were going to move, and they had to study somewhere else. Ichiro asked them to leave her in his care for 3 years until she finished high school. Shirori still liked this because he blushed when they said good things about him. But leaving Ichiro aside, Momoko asked Shirori to tell more about herself. She began to describe what the island where she lived was like, but when asked for a memory of her time there, she couldn't tell her she was a princess, and as Momoko saw that she didn't want to answer, they stopped talking about it. And she gave her what she had promised her, a graphic tablet for her digital work. After dinner, when Momoka and Sana left, Maki wanted to keep talking all night, and Shirori told her they could stay with her, and they included Chibi, who wanted to know more about Shirori and offered her room for a sleepover. There, she recommended Shirori her favorite book, but she didn't want Maki to see what she had in one of her boxes, and since the 3 of them were in confidence, Shirori confessed that she was a princess on her island. But before continuing to tell her about the trouble she caused Ichiro, Maki told her that although they were friends, they could have their own secrets, and if her brother knew it, there was no problem with keeping that secret to herself. In the end, they became closer, while Ichiro, who heard through the door that Shirori thought she had caused him more trouble, offered her to go out together after Christmas dinner. And when she saw it as a date, she accepted without much thought. On that date, they walked down the street and saw a decorated Christmas tree. For Shirori, it was the first time she had seen one, and she liked it because the lights reminded her of the stars. But the ones on the tree were closer. And for Ichiro, now seeing one of these details was more special, and perhaps it was because he was seeing it with her. Although she told him that she falls more in love with him every time, she didn't want to hurt him with the oath of her thorn, thinking it was her fault. But Ichiro told her that he didn't like her carrying that burden alone, so he wanted to think with her about what to do, including her family and her condition, because the reason for this was that he loved her. He didn't want to go out with her as if it were a test. So at that moment, he asked her to have a courtship with the intention of getting married, and it wouldn't be a commitment imposed by his family. Upon hearing that, she asked him if she could kiss him. At the stroke of midnight, the couple shared their first kiss. When they returned home, Maki thought they must have been very cold because she saw that both of them had red faces. I don't know, but something must have happened. What Maki and Chibi thought that night, Shirori was happy because she finally managed to kiss him, and she wondered if she kissed him on the mouth or on the cheek because the moment she did it, she closed her eyes, and besides, she thought that moment had lasted an eternity. But when she calculated it, it lasted less than a second, and she was imagining what a 1-second kiss would be like until her mother sent her a message. And the next day, when she met Ichiro, she told him that a message had arrived from the island, and she thought it was surely a way to break the bond she had. But she didn't tell Shiori that it was her mother, who said the island was waiting for her return. But she, knowing that if she returned, it would surely be a long time before she could come back, and besides, she didn't have to worry about breaking the bond. She just needed a little time until the person Shiori commissioned to find out how to break it found a way to do it. Ichiro told her she shouldn't think too much about that and instead offered to help with New Year's preparations. So they fixed up the whole house before that day, bought everything they needed, and that night they watched some series together as a family so that on the first day of the year they could visit the temples. And after offering their prayers in one of these, they went to the fair that was going on, and with the 4 tickets they had to participate in a booth where a prize was a stuffed animal, and Maki wanted it, but none of the 3 managed to get it. And when Shiori's turn came, she didn't win the stuffed animal either, but something better than that, a family night at the hot spring inn, which they wouldn't waste, and they would go on a trip to the hot springs where, like any inn, it had good hot springs, nice rooms, and a view of the mountain. I don't know if it's Mount Fuji. Oh, look, if it is. So there they enjoyed the baths divided by gender and ate the luxurious banquet that was included on one of those nights. Ichiro rested his feet and Shiori kept him company while showing him the graphics tablet she received from Momoka. And it was then that he explained that he hadn't been looking her in the eyes lately because he was nervous and asked if she wanted to go back to the island. And then she told him that she wasn't actually here with her mother's permission, but that she took advantage of her grandmother's will to leave the island, and it was the first time she had revealed it to her mother. He, upon hearing her worried about that matter, felt bad because he didn't know what to do to cheer her up. But that wasn't necessary since just by holding her hand and leaning on him, she felt much better, apart from understanding how he felt, a thing that for a man knowing what a woman wants is much more difficult than finding the one piece. The next morning, after feeling all those emotions, Ichiro couldn't sleep well, and while looking at some photos he took yesterday, Shiori asked him to pass them to her, but just then her mother called. At first, she didn't want to answer, but she had to, and she asked Ichiro to listen to the call. Her mother told her that she was surely enjoying herself while they were worried about her, and that everything she was on the island. But Shiori denied that, saying that there were also people here who appreciated her, besides confessing that she had a boyfriend. The last thing she thought she shouldn't say, but at that moment Ichiro took the phone and introduced himself to her mother, saying that he was officially in a relationship with her daughter. And well, Shiori's mother was really shocked by the news and hung up the call. He thought he had done wrong by saying that, but she didn't care because she felt very loved and cared for. Now that things were better, so to speak, they went out for a walk. Ichiro asked if he did well in saying he was Shiori's boyfriend, and maybe that would cause problems with her family. Speaking of her, the mother, I don't know if she misunderstood Ichiro's statement because she was telling some villagers from the island that her daughter was being charmed by a man from Tokyo, and they started insulting Ichiro, saying he was surely a fortune hunter and that he was interested in Shiori for that reason, so her mother would go for her along with her husband. And these two here, I have no idea who they are. But going back to Ichiro and Shiori, he remained worried thinking that what he said in the call would worsen the situation with his family, and he told her so, but she was happy that he had said it, and that was what mattered. He no longer had to lose confidence in himself because of what happened. She considered him a gentleman, and since Ichiro didn't think the same, Shiori felt bad that the person she loved didn't value himself, and feeling it, he received a punishment for the connection they had, which made him see stars. And he wondered if that was the only way they connected, until Shiori woke him up and lied that it was a little anemia. She felt some guilt for feeling that way, but didn't let it take over, and lifted him up to take him away from the store, saying that with this bond they had, they couldn't fight properly. Speaking of that, Ichiro clarified that he didn't consider himself charming, but he liked the part of him that loved her, and at least that made her feel better. Then Ichiro's brothers arrived, who were worried about him, but when they saw he was fine, Maki gave them a set of keychains because they would surely like it. And when his brothers returned to the store, Shiori understood that since they were in love, they needed to get rid of that imposed commitment by going together to the island, and Ichiro liked the idea, agreeing that they would go together. But that same day, when they arrived home, Shiori's family was waiting for her, and her mother was coming to take her away. When they met Ichiro, they were confused because they thought their daughter's boyfriend was someone more rebellious, who had gotten a tattoo in Canada and had a stuffed animal to sleep with. But they came across this, the most normal and NPC type you can meet. That night they expected to talk to them, but Shiori's family saw that Ichiro's brothers were sleepy and left the conversation for tomorrow. Meanwhile, that night, Yero and Shori talked about how now that their family had come, they might know how to break the contract. And he asked who she had commissioned to find out how to do it. Coincidentally, it was one of her mother's companions, but she denied that they still knew they were engaged by the thorn. But if they told her mother, Shirori said, she would surely think they wanted to end their relationship. Sometimes words didn't work with her mother, so their goal for tomorrow was to convince her to break the thorn engagement and make her family return to the island. In the morning, the two set off to meet Shiori's family, encouraged by Ichiro's brothers. And when they met Shiori's mother and father, just with them because their companions weren't there, Yero had good intentions for them to get to know each other, but Shiori's mother wasn't interested in getting to know him better. She just wanted her daughter to return to the island. Apparently, she didn't get along well with her mother and argued about her behavior. But once they calmed down, Ichiro and Shori planned to carry out the plan as agreed, only that a few things went wrong, and they ended up confessing that she told who he was, adding that she touched his thorn by accident. Obviously, her mother thought the worst because the darn thorn was on her back. And although they clarified that it was an accident, she didn't believe any of it and explained that Shirori was the daughter of the stars and that a human from outside the island shouldn't touch her, thinking that surely her poor daughter was deceived by Ichiro. And because of that, seeing that her mother didn't believe her, she escaped from the meeting while remembering that since she was a child, she always wanted to play with the other children on the island. But her mother told her that she was an extraordinary being and that no one could touch her. So it would be best if she didn't leave the house. She was later found by Ichiro, who understood more or less how she felt because he also cut ties with his mother. But Shirori wanted her mother to be happy that she found a very good boyfriend. At that moment, her father arrived to ask her to come back. Ichiro asked if the thorn punishments with his wife didn't affect him, and to tell the truth, he was perfectly fine if he distanced himself from her. Upon returning, the mother apologized to Shirori for raising her from childhood so that no one would touch her, and also asked them to explain how the accident with the thorn happened. Ichiro told her what happened, and upon learning that he really wanted to protect her daughter, he proposed that they annul the contract. It was something the mother didn't expect, and thinking that breaking the contract would also end their relationship, she was happy that they finally understood each other. But Shirori clarified that she wouldn't return to the island for the time being, only that her mother, still wanting her to return, told her that she was here with their support while they sacrificed paying the expenses. She was having fun in this place. Also, in the time she had been here, she hadn't achieved anything drawing manga. It was then that Ichiro interrupted, saying what was wrong with her having fun, and also began to recount how good she was with the people in the condo and with her brothers. Regarding her work in manga, he showed all the work she had helped with, and although they didn't want to give her permission to stay, he wouldn't allow them to say that she had done nothing in the time she had been living here, and then demonstrate how much she had strived. He asked for more time, and the father, who was a bit more understanding, said that Shirori could stay for another year, but they would send less money each time to see if she could become independent. So they agreed with Ichiro that he would take care of her and prevent another accident. The mother accepted what her husband proposed, but she would still return with her within a year after agreeing. Shiori's father clarified that he wasn't on Ichiro's side. Rather, he was looking for the best for his wife, who, although she didn't want to admit it, was glad that her daughter was fine. After bidding farewell to her parents, Shirori thanked him for being by her side in these moments, and when they returned home, Ichiro's brothers were worried about them and made a wish on the homemade shooting star that they had made, asking for Shirori to stay. And when the two of them arrived, they gave them the news that they had succeeded, but just after that and Ichiro was dreaming like a child, while his father only had time to work. He helped him clean when they were grouped in threes at school, and he was in a group of 4, always sacrificing himself to make it a group of 3, helping with the cleaning in school for those who were busy, and he got a prize in ice cream. He wanted to give it to someone, but since they didn't accept it, he kept it in a box to appreciate this gift. Upon waking up that morning, they received a visit from the parents' companions, Shirori, Makadu, and Kamaki, in charge of removing the thorn contract. Exactly, Makadu would be the one in charge of that because she was a woman who looked like a man, but he explained that with this clamp she had to remove the thorn and then continue with the ritual. But for that they needed to take measurements of Ichiro for an outfit. Although compared to the clamp, which was something divine, the outfit and the place where the ritual would be didn't matter. And since he was curious about the happiness that Shiori's grandmother spoke of, Makadu told him that the grandmother had an encounter with a shooting star and wished that the girls in her family would adore and love them. But in those last years of her life, she regretted that wish. So all Makadu wanted was to help the princess in any way she could, and noticing that she liked Ichiro, because before breaking the contract, according to Makadu, it was the first time this had been done, and perhaps when they break it, they won't be in love with each other anymore. Shirori helped Kamaki with the dizziness, who showed her that the people of the island were waiting for her. And also, she told her the same thing as Makadu, that surely when they break the contract, her feelings towards Ichiro would disappear. Ending their visit the next day would be the ritual, and what neither of the two wanted to mention was what they heard from Makadu and Kamaki. They even pretended that everything was fine in front of Maki and Fumio that night. Ichiro called Momoko after that to ask her a favor, to stay with his brothers the next day, which would be the ritual in another place. But the excuse he told her was that he would go out with Shirori, and he was thinking that he had never felt this way about someone before, so he was afraid of losing her, and as it was the first time Ichiro talked about love to Momoko, it seemed funny to her, but nothing happened because that's how love was. After that call, Ichiro prayed that what he felt this time would be something true, while Shirori remembered that on the island, once Kamaki told her that someday she could marry her, but when she asked her what she liked about her, she said she liked that she was the princess, and one day when Shirori visited her grandmother's library, she found the shoujo manga and knew what true love was, but Kamaki's words that surely that feeling was a product of the contract echoed in her head, and both hoped that this would not be the case. The next morning Shirori was ready with the outfit for the ritual, and what Kamaki, the hormonal brat, said was that she should marry him, that he would force himself a lot, and wished that the annulment of the contract would be a success. Damn child. As for Ichiro, he was also ready with his outfit, but seeing Shiori's pale face before the ritual, he regretted not talking about this with her yesterday. It was already too late to do so, because the ritual had already begun. Ichiro took a liquor so that the thorn would materialize, he says, and once that happened, she had to throw it away with the tweezers. Only while this was happening, he was afraid of forgetting everything they had talked about. He would have spoken more with her, which for him was like a gift that he couldn't open because he didn't feel he deserved it, so he regretted not doing it, and seeing her smile when she finished removing the thorn, he was still in shock about it. And once the ritual ended successfully, Shirori, while crying, told him that she was free now and asked him if he still loved her. He didn't stay still and hugged her, saying that he loved her. She said it too. This is cinema. And when the ritual ended, Makadu took the brat away so that he wouldn't bother the couple, and everything ended well. Shirori returned to the condo, and Ichiro's brothers were relieved that she had returned, so taking advantage of the fact that Shirori was with him, he invited her to go out the next day, which clearly for her was a date. And as it would be the first one after breaking the thorn commitment, she wanted it to be memorable, so she went shopping for a new dress. She met Chibi in a clothing store and asked her to help her choose a good dress for her date, and well, Chibi spoke very well about Ichiro and his tastes, remembering that he made her feel good when she cried because she didn't have another color of kimono, which made Shirori think that maybe he liked her, and she clarified that she wanted him as an illusion being older and a good person because she knew he would never love her the same way, and she was glad that it was Shirori who was dating him. When they both returned home and Shirori let slip that she bought a dress for her date tomorrow, Ichiro immediately visited Seino's house to teach him how to dress for a date. Speaking of the date, when they both arrived at the place where they would meet, they were surprised at how good the other looked, and they were very excited about this date. The first place they went to was an ice skating rink, where neither of them knew how to skate. But Shirori, noticing that if neither of them learned, they would never be able to hold hands, so she learned. But he wanted to finish learning so they could skate together, and the reason he told her that was that since they broke the contract he wanted to make sure she didn't get hurt, as once he was close to ending what he had. So he wanted to be able to say what he felt, and after practicing a bit he asked her to hold hands, and they did what they both wanted to do, skate like a couple, and when they returned home they were warmly welcomed by Ichiro's brothers who, speaking of them, when Ichiro noticed that last month they had spent more than usual, he decided that this month they would spend just enough. Maki heard this, and when she went to play with her friends, one of them asked if she had already asked her older brother if she could go to the amusement park another day, and since she knew her brother's financial situation, or rather had no intention of asking him, her friends understood, and there was no problem. Shirori saw this, and when she got home Maki knew she had seen them and asked her not to tell her brother what she had talked about with her friends, and also prevented Fumio from bothering Ichiro when he was busy. Shirori was thinking about what Maki's problem was with her friends. Fumio told Maki to go play with them because he would play with Shirori, which made her feel bad, and the sound of her crying caught Ichiro's attention, who, after they explained the situation to him, understood that Maki didn't go with her friends to be able to help him take care of Fumio and felt like an unreliable older brother worrying him like that, so he told her that if something was bothering her, she should give him most of the problem. It was the best solution of all. In the end, Maki and Fumio made up, and when Shirori heard that they wanted to see the fireworks, she proposed to have their own festival before the summer festival. She invited Momoka and Sano to the event they would make, and while they were celebrating in the garden, they were joined by the neighbor Maki had met. Maki managed to thank Ichiro for everything he did for them, and although it wasn't a summer festival, everyone had a good time, and Ichiro thanked Shirori for the idea of the festival since he couldn't do it alone. And he liked it when she did things he wouldn't be able to do. And he told her to keep doing them. She felt happy that he supported her and said she would do anything on her own when she got a job, one of them being to propose to him, who thought he would never be able to beat him in that, but knew that with the effort of both of them they could achieve anything. And with that, there's only one thing to say: long live the couple.
Don't forget to subscribe to see more anime summaries.